What if I told you that a man can look you in the eye, tell you he cares about you, spend time with you, and still never truly let you in? What if I told you that the most dangerous men are not the ones who disappear after 2 dates, but the ones who stay just long enough to make you believe you're building something while silently keeping their walls intact? This is the hidden language of men who aren't serious, and if you don't learn how to decode it, you'll keep mistaking proximity for intimacy and attention for investment. A man's words are cheap. His behavior is data, and like any strategist, you have to read that data with clarity. Here's the truth. A man can enjoy your company, admire your beauty, and still never place you in the category of a woman he will fight to keep. Why? Because men operate on a primal binary: territory they guard and territory they simply enjoy passing through. The difference is not in how he treats you on a good day, but in the signals he cannot hide when his guard drops. Think about this. A man who isn't serious will talk about the future in vague, non-committal ways. He'll say things like, "We should travel sometime," or "Maybe one day we'll do that." He dangles possibilities like bait, not because he intends to follow through, but because it keeps you engaged in the present without demanding clarity. If he were serious, his language would have precision. He wouldn't say "maybe next month." He would say, "I booked us something next month." A man's seriousness is always revealed in the bridge between words and action. When the bridge is missing, the promise is smoke. Now let's go deeper. Men who aren't serious use silence as a shield. They won't argue with you about your needs. They won't fight for or against the relationship. They'll simply nod, agree in the moment, and then return to their default, doing the minimum. This is because they know resistance would expose their lack of investment, and they want to avoid being cornered. Silence is not respect. Silence is strategic avoidance. A man who is serious will risk conflict, because conflict is the cost of building something real. You've probably experienced this yourself. You express disappointment about how he rarely makes plans. He listens, he apologizes, and for 1 week, he improves. But then he slides right back into patterns. That is not change. That is damage control. A man who sees you as essential will not need to be reminded twice, because in his mind, your presence is tied to his identity and his status as a man. He will self-correct because losing you feels like losing ground. But the man who isn't serious doesn't fear that loss. To him, you are replaceable, valuable enough to keep around, but not vital enough to anchor him. And this is where women often confuse effort with intention. He buys you dinner, he compliments you, he spends the night. These things feel like investment, but they are not. They are the cost of access. Think of it like a man paying for a gym membership. Just because he pays the fee doesn't mean he's training for a marathon. It just means he wants the door to stay open. True intention reveals itself in sacrifice, when he rearranges his schedule, when he chooses inconvenience for your benefit, when he moves beyond words into structural change. If you don't see sacrifice, you're not seeing seriousness. There's also a subtle pattern in his storytelling. A man who isn't serious will talk about his past in ways that distance himself from commitment. He'll say things like, "I've never really been into relationships," or "I'm not the type who settles down easily." He'll dress it up as honesty, as if he's giving you a gift of transparency. But what he's really doing is planting a seed, conditioning you to lower your expectations. If you accept that seed, you will start excusing his behavior, saying to yourself, "Well, that's just how he is." But remember, a man reveals his blueprint early. If he tells you he isn't built for commitment, believe him. Now, you might ask, why would a man stay if he isn't serious? Why not leave? The answer is simple. Men are driven by access, not attachment. If he can have your body, your time, your energy, your validation, without the weight of responsibility, why would he walk away? He stays because the arrangement benefits him. You stay because you hope it will evolve. And that gap between his comfort and your hope is where years of your life can quietly disappear. The key is this. Stop listening to how much he says he likes you, and start measuring how much he fears to lose you. A man who is serious knows that another man could step in and take his place. That fear forces him to act. He calls, he plans, he claims. A man who isn't serious feels no urgency, because in his mind, you are already secured without him needing to fight. And when a man doesn't fight, you should never assume it's because he's calm. It's because he's not invested. So the next time you find yourself analyzing his texts, wondering why his words sound sweet but his actions feel shallow, ask yourself this. Is this a man building a bridge or a man keeping a door slightly open? Because the difference determines whether you are his priority or just his convenience. If you're ready to stop mistaking attention for intention, subscribe now, because in our next video, I'll expose the psychological test men use silently on every woman they date and why most women fail it. Here's the brutal truth you need to accept. A man who isn't serious is not careless with his language by accident. He is intentional. Men understand instinctively that women attach meaning to words, and so they use words as a form of currency. But there's a difference between currency and investment. Currency passes through hands. It has no anchor. Investment is when that currency is tied to something long-term. The man who isn't serious will spend words on you like loose change. He knows you'll hold on to them, roll them around in your mind, and use them to build hope. But when the time comes to cash those words in, there is nothing in the bank. Imagine this dynamic like a poker game. A man who is serious pushes real chips into the center of the table. He risks something: his time, his pride, his resources. He is willing to play for keeps. A man who isn't serious? He bluffs. He talks about big plays, but when it's time to bet, he pulls his hand back. And here's the sharp edge of the analogy. The bluff works only as long as the other player doesn't call it. The moment you stop believing his words and start demanding action, the man who isn't serious folds. You've probably seen this play out in your own life or in the lives of women you know. A man fills your phone with good morning texts, sweet nothings, future-oriented words like someday and when we, and yet months pass without him making a real move. This is not a glitch in the system. This is the system. His language is designed to keep you in orbit around him, but without gravity pulling him closer to you. It's a tactic, whether conscious or instinctive, of maintaining access without responsibility. And the signs become clearer when you test him. Watch what happens when you withdraw. A man who is serious will feel the vacuum immediately. He will move toward you, not just with words, but with action, because your absence threatens his claim. But the man who isn't serious will simply allow the space to grow. He may send a text or two to keep the line warm, but he won't step forward with urgency. Why? Because losing you doesn't register as loss to him. It registers as inconvenience, and that distinction reveals everything. Here's another hidden signal: the way a man frames his time. When a man is serious, he thinks in terms of integration. He wants you woven into his routines, his weekends, his decisions. His calendar reflects you. When he makes plans, you are factored in by default. But when a man isn't serious, you will always notice that his time with you is conditional. He fits you in when it's easy, when it doesn't clash with his priorities. You'll hear lines like, "I'll let you know later," or "maybe if I'm free." His language treats you as an option, not as a fixture. And here's the ruthless reality. If a man uses language that places you on the margins of his schedule, it's because that's exactly where you are in his hierarchy. And pay attention to the stories he tells about other women. A man who isn't serious often talks in a way that subtly reminds you of your competition. He may bring up exes casually, he may reference how other women treated him, or even joke about other options. Why does he do this? Not necessarily because he's comparing you, but because he wants you to feel that he is not fully captured. His language reminds you that you are not yet the only one, and that uncertainty keeps you working harder to secure him. It's a psychological tactic, conscious or not, that shifts the burden of proof onto you. Now let's address the hardest truth. Many women hear these signs, see the patterns, and still convince themselves he just needs more time. But time doesn't transform a man's intentions. It only reveals them. A man who isn't serious will not suddenly wake up 1 year later and decide you are his priority. What he reveals in the first months is the blueprint. His language is not a placeholder for future seriousness. It is the declaration of his present stance. If he is non-committal in speech now, he will be non-committal in action later. Believing otherwise is not strategy, it's self-deception. Think of it this way: when a man wants a car, he doesn't spend years test driving it without buying. He either secures it quickly or he moves on. Men do not linger in indecision when they see high value. They act. The same principle applies in relationships. If a man is circling but never landing, it is not because he's unsure. It's because he's sure that he doesn't need to commit to still get what he wants. And every day you allow it, you reinforce that calculation. Here's the paradox. The more you invest in proving your worth to a man who isn't serious, the less he feels compelled to step up. Because from his perspective, he already has the benefits without the cost. Why would he raise the price on himself? The only way to flip that script is to make your presence conditional. When you stop rewarding bluffing language and start demanding action-backed words, you shift the leverage. And leverage is everything. So ask yourself this: when he speaks, are his words anchored in movement, or do they drift like empty promises? Because if you don't learn to separate language from loyalty, you will keep mistaking noise for signal. And in the game of attraction, that mistake is the difference between being chosen and being strung along. Here's where the hidden layers of male language cut the deepest. A man who isn't serious will constantly calibrate his tone and phrasing to keep you emotionally hooked, but not secured. This is why you'll notice a cycle: moments of intensity, where he speaks with passion, followed by long stretches of vagueness or withdrawal. It's not random, it's conditioning. He gives you a taste of certainty, then pulls it away, knowing that your mind will fill the silence with hope. This intermittent reinforcement is the same psychological mechanism that keeps people addicted to slot machines. You never know when the next hit of validation will come, so you keep playing. And here's the key insight: men who aren't serious don't need to lie outright. They simply tell partial truths. They'll say, "I care about you," which is true, but incomplete. Caring is not claiming. They'll say, "I'm not seeing anyone else," which may be true, but irrelevant, because not seeing others doesn't mean seeing you with intention. The language is carefully selected to satisfy your immediate doubts while avoiding any binding commitment. That is how a man keeps you close without being held accountable. Think about the conversations where you've brought up clarity. You ask where things are going, and he replies with phrases like, "I'm just taking things slow," or "I'm not ready to label it yet." On the surface, this sounds reasonable, but in reality what he's saying is, "I don't see enough value to claim you, but I don't want to lose the benefits of your presence." His words are designed to appear cautious, but they are really evasive. And if you're not trained to decode that, you will interpret his hesitation as depth, when in fact it is avoidance. The most dangerous sign is when a man positions himself as the exception. He'll say things like, "I'm not like other guys," or "I've been hurt before, so I move differently." This language plays on your empathy. It makes you feel that patience is the price of access, that you must prove yourself worthy of his eventual vulnerability. But here's the truth: men who are serious don't weaponize their past as an excuse to delay their present. They act in spite of fear, because claiming a woman they value outweighs their hesitation. The man who isn't serious uses fear as a shield to buy more time, while still enjoying the rewards of your patience. Let's dissect the silence even further. When a man is invested, his communication is proactive. He doesn't wait for you to ask, he volunteers. He updates you about his day, he involves you in his decisions, he anticipates your concerns. But when a man isn't serious, his silence speaks volumes. You'll notice that you are always the initiator, the one holding the thread of connection. He replies, but he doesn't initiate. He listens, but he doesn't share. His silence is not shyness. It is absence of investment. A man who is serious understands that words are bridges. A man who isn't serious leaves you to build both sides of the bridge yourself. And here is where the evolutionary truth comes in. Men, at their core, are territorial. When they claim something of value, they signal it loudly, through words, through behavior, through public recognition. That's why a man who is serious will not hide you. He will name you, introduce you, establish your presence in his world. A man who is not serious will keep his language vague in social contexts. He'll call you my friend, or avoid labels altogether. He does this not because he's confused, but because he doesn't want the social weight of commitment. His language shields him from accountability, both to you and to others. Picture this scenario. You're out together, and someone asks, "So are you two a couple?" A man who is serious doesn't hesitate. He places a verbal stake in the ground. A man who isn't serious laughs it off, dodges, or gives an ambiguous answer. That moment tells you everything. His unwillingness to name you is his unwillingness to claim you. And in relationships, claim is everything. Now, why do so many women ignore these signs? Because the female instinct is to interpret words through emotion, not through structure. You hear tone, affection, care, but men use tone as camouflage. You must learn to strip language down to its bones. Ask, does this word change the structure of my life with him? Does this phrase alter his behavior in a measurable way? If the answer is no, then the words are smoke. Here's the unfiltered truth. A man who is serious doesn't fear clarity. He doesn't avoid definitive language, because he knows his actions back it up. The man who isn't serious speaks in shadows, because shadows give him room to maneuver. And as long as you accept those shadows, you give him permission to remain undefined. So here is your strategic shift. Stop measuring how often a man speaks to you, and start measuring the weight of what he speaks into existence. If his language builds nothing, it is because he is building nothing with you. And every day you allow that, you are complicit in your own sidelining. The question you need to ask yourself is this: if tomorrow you cut off the access he has to your time, your body, your energy, would his words transform into action, or would they vanish into silence? The answer to that question reveals whether you are his choice or his convenience.